The night sky over Ukraine once again turned into a battlefield of shadows, explosions and relentless urgency as Russia launched yet another wave of missile and drone strikes aimed squarely at the country's energy infrastructure. In Kyiv, the impact was felt not only in the trembling of the ground beneath people's feet, but in the growing fear that winter may offer Russia another brutal opportunity to weaponize cold and darkness against millions of civilians. As dawn broke, however, what emerged was not only devastation, but a reaffirmation of Ukraine's resolve and a renewed message from President Volodymyr Zelensky that the country's air defense remains its most vital line of survival. In an address delivered from Kyiv, the Ukrainian leader offered a detailed and sober assessment of the latest attack, which involved hundreds of hostile aerial targets aimed at crippling the nation's power system. Volodymyr Zelensky, president of Ukraine, said work is still ongoing after last night's Russian missile and drone strikes. It was a large-scale attack with energy infrastructure as the main target. Russia is not changing its tactics and is still trying to inflict this kind of pain on Ukraine before winter. Those words captured both the scale of the threat and Moscow's strategic intention to exhaust Ukraine's resources, undermine civilian morale and stretch its defense systems to the limit just as temperatures fall and demand for energy surges. Throughout Ukraine, air defense operators spent the night bracing for the arrival of cruise missiles, ballistic projectiles and swarms of explosive-laden drones, many of them Shaheds, the Iranian-designed weapons Russia has used extensively since 2022. The Ukrainian military confirmed that it had successfully intercepted 19 missiles, including ballistic models notoriously more difficult to shoot down, and nearly 560 drones, an extraordinary number even by the brutal standards of this war. Around 300 of those drones were Shaheds, which Kyiv says Russia has begun deploying in even larger numbers in an attempt to overwhelm radar and air defense batteries. Zelensky praised the shootdowns but made clear that the threat remains severe. He said, "It is important that we are countering this. It is important that there have been shootdowns. 19 missiles were shot down, including ballistic missiles. Nearly 560 drones were also shot down, including about 300 Shaheds. Unfortunately, not everything was shot down, and working to strengthen air defense is our #1 priority." His words reflected a painful truth. Even with some of the world's most advanced air defense systems from US, Patriots to Germany's Iris-T and NASAM's Ukraine cannot guarantee full protection over a country stretching more than 600,000 square kilometers. The intercepted projectiles prevented what could have been catastrophic power outages across the country, yet some critical infrastructure was still damaged. Ukrainian officials reported disruptions in several regions, and emergency crews worked throughout the day restoring power, clearing debris and extinguishing fires. The scale of response underscored how deeply Ukraine relies on fast, coordinated reactions in moments like these and how fragile its energy grid remains after nearly 4 years of targeted attacks. Zelensky's statement also came at a time when Ukraine is preparing for a new round of diplomatic engagement. The next week is expected to be crucial in shaping the direction of Ukraine's defense cooperation with Western partners, particularly amid evolving political debates in Washington and European capitals. Zelensky noted, "We are preparing to work with our partners next week, including to improve the quality of our air defense, and we are counting on our partners' assistance." Those remarks signal that Kyiv is seeking additional commitments, not just replacement missiles, but entire systems capable of protecting major urban centres and essential infrastructure. The Ukrainian president's message is also rooted in geopolitical timing. The war is nearly 2 years deep, and both Ukraine and its allies are adjusting strategies in the face of prolonged conflict. Zelensky confirmed that Ukrainian officials are already en route to the United States for discussions that could influence not only the battlefield, but the broader diplomatic trajectory of the conflict. He said this evening, US time, the Ukrainian delegation should already be in the United States, and the dialogue based on the Geneva points will continue. Diplomacy remains active. The American side is being constructive, and it is quite realistic to finalize steps in the coming days to determine how to end the war with dignity. The Ukrainian delegation has the necessary directives. That reference to the Geneva points is a reminder that a complex diplomatic effort continues behind closed doors, one in which the United States remains a central mediator. While Ukraine maintains that any peace framework must include the restoration of internationally recognized borders and guarantees of long-term security, the realities of war, Ukrainian exhaustion, and international pressure all play a role in shaping what is possible. Kyiv's insistence on ending the war with dignity signals that it is determined to avoid concessions that would undermine sovereignty or reward aggression. Still, the violence on the ground remains a constant backdrop to these diplomatic efforts. The latest attacks were some of the most intense since the start of the winter season, underscoring Russia's continued belief that Ukraine's energy grid offers a prime target to weaken the population's resolve. Since 2022, Russia has repeatedly aimed missiles and drones at power plants, substations and transmission lines in what Ukrainian authorities call a deliberate strategy of energy terror. Each winter, attacks tend to increase, reflecting both tactical and psychological goals, limiting Ukraine's ability to heat homes, power hospitals and maintain normal life, while simultaneously testing the durability of its air defense umbrella. Emergency services in Kyiv and several other regions reported fires, damaged buildings and injuries. The full extent of infrastructure damage remained unclear as engineers worked to evaluate system stability. Hospitals, water facilities and major transportation hubs switched to backup generators in some districts, while authorities urged citizens to conserve power during peak evening hours. These ripple effects demonstrate how even partially successful attacks can disrupt daily life and create strain on essential services. For many Ukrainians, this latest wave stirred painful memories of the harsh winter of 2022 to 2023, when millions endured rolling blackouts as Russia tried to freeze the country into submission. Since then, Ukraine has expanded its decentralized energy networks, built more protective structures around key facilities and coordinated more closely with European neighbours to stabilise electricity flows. But even so, its grid cannot fully withstand a sustained barrage of precision missiles without significant assistance, especially given Russia's capacity to launch multiple waves in a single night. The scale of drone use in the latest attack shows how Russia has adapted its tactics. By launching hundreds of drones before or alongside ballistic and cruise missiles, Moscow forces Ukraine to expend valuable air defense ammunition on smaller, cheaper targets. The Shahed drones, though simple, can cause serious damage if they penetrate defenses. Their sheer number forces Ukraine to stretch its radar coverage and divide its resources, sometimes enabling missiles to slip through. This tactic has become a defining feature of the war, challenging Ukraine's partners to supply both high-end interceptors and more affordable systems that can handle mass drone swarms. Zelensky's message reflects growing urgency. Ukraine's air defense systems rely heavily on Western stockpiles. Germany, for example, has delivered Patriot launchers, while Norway and the US have supported the deployment of NASAMS batteries. Yet resupply remains a constant challenge, and each interception drains resources that must be replenished. Zelensky's appeal underscores that without sustained international support, Ukraine's capacity to defend its cities could erode, especially at a moment when Russia appears prepared to escalate aerial assaults. The president's remarks also come amid political debates in allied countries. In Washington, lawmakers continue negotiating additional assistance packages for Kyiv. Europe, meanwhile, faces differing views on long-term military aid, with some countries pushing for greater support and others expressing fatigue. Against this backdrop, Zelensky's diplomatic mission to Washington carries significant weight as Ukraine seeks not only weapons but guarantees of stability through the winter. The reference to finalising steps in the coming days suggests that discussions may include both military assistance and long-term strategies, possibly even frameworks for future negotiations with Russia. Yet Kyiv remains firm that its security cannot be compromised, and any peace agreement must be grounded in respect for territorial integrity. Zelensky has repeatedly stated that Ukrainian sovereignty is not negotiable, a stance echoed by many Western governments. Though geopolitical pressures continue to shape the landscape, The mood in Kyiv following the attack captured a mix of fear, fatigue and defiance. Residents described hearing explosions through the early hours, with some reporting that the barrage lasted longer than previous nights. For families living near energy infrastructure, the night brought tense moments as they watched emergency vehicles race through the streets. In some districts, windows rattled with the force of shock waves, and the distant hum of air defence launchers became yet another reminder of the nation's dependence on technology and Western support. Despite these challenges, Ukraine's success in intercepting hundreds of drones demonstrates how far its defence capabilities have come. In the early months of the war, Kyiv struggled to counter large-scale drone attacks. Now, coordinated networks of radar, anti-aircraft guns, mobile air defence vehicles and anti-drone teams are operating with increasing efficiency. Even so, Zelensky's insistence on strengthening air defence highlights that Ukraine cannot afford complacency. The threat remains dynamic, and Russia continuously adapts its tactics. The approaching winter adds pressure. Heating networks, water systems and electricity grids become more vulnerable during cold months, and any successful strike can cause disproportionate damage. This makes the timing of Zelensky's diplomatic outreach significant. The Ukrainian government hopes to secure not only immediate support, but commitments that will carry the country through winter and beyond. For many Ukrainians, the coming months represent another test of endurance, with the hope that their international partners will match their determination. In Kyiv, engineers, soldiers and volunteers worked throughout the day to stabilize power supply, clear debris and support affected communities. Their efforts reflect a recurring cycle: destruction followed by rapid mobilization, a pattern that has defined much of Ukraine's experience since 2022. Zelensky's statement thanking Ukraine's defenders, though not quoted directly here, also reflects the deep reliance on those working behind the scenes, from military operators to energy workers and emergency responders. International reactions to the attack were swift. Several European leaders condemned the strikes as violations of international law and acts targeting civilian infrastructure. Humanitarian organisations raised concerns about potential impacts on vulnerable populations, including the elderly, children and those living in frontline regions. While the attack underscores the brutality of Russia's tactics, it also reinforces Ukraine's argument for urgent and sustained defensive support. As Ukraine awaits the outcomes of upcoming diplomatic engagements, the country remains in a delicate position, resilient but strained, determined but deeply reliant on its partners. Zelensky's emphasis on ending the war with dignity resonates deeply with the Ukrainian public, many of whom are exhausted by the conflict but unwilling to accept a resolution that leaves their nation weakened or divided. The events of the past night illustrate the stakes of this moment. With hundreds of aerial threats neutralized but damage still inflicted, with diplomatic negotiations advancing but military pressure unrelenting, Ukraine finds itself navigating a complex intersection of warfare, diplomacy and national survival. In the face of these challenges, Zelensky's message was clear. Air defence is not just a military priority, but the cornerstone of protecting civilian life, preserving infrastructure and maintaining hope through another difficult winter. While Ukraine prepares for further rounds of talks in the United States, the country also braces for additional attacks. The coming days and weeks are likely to bring new challenges both on the battlefield and in diplomatic chambers. Yet the overarching theme remains unchanged. Ukraine's struggle is far from over, but its determination endures. And as long as Russia continues to target its cities, its grid and its people, Kyiv will press its allies for stronger, faster and more comprehensive support. In the end, Zelensky's remarks capture a moment of both vulnerability and resolve. A nation exhausted by war but steadfast in its belief that its future must be secured on its own terms, with dignity, sovereignty and the support of partners who recognise the broader implications of this conflict. Ukraine's skies may be filled with threats, but its determination to defend them remains unwavering.